Student looked at the weapon before him. Gouge out my eyes? You're insane!
And you're lost.
Student closed his mouth, for he had nothing to say.
What good are your eyes anyway? You don't really see anything as it is. You already feel blind.
I can't.
Well, if only seeing were subjected to the will, then maybe you could. Whether you can or cannot, that's trivial. We can leave that to the philosophers. What is certain is that right now your sight is dependent upon another, and he is pressing you. So harden up and take yourself home, or grab the axe and pluck out your eyes. How blessed you'd be were you able to see.
With that, Student wielded the tool and gouged out one eye. Pain surged his body, and keeping both eyes forced closed, Student yelled, "Is this enough?" as he tossed the eye to the man.
Is half ever enough?
Student took the blade and removed the last eye, tossing it like the other.
Good. Now come closer, that I might hear you.
I can't see anything.
Then open your eyes.
And at his voice, all fell silent. The air stood still. The pain eased. Student opened his eyes, as if he had eyes, and what once had been a man was now a giant, stooped down, looking eye to eye with Student. Embedded in the palms of his hands were Student's eyes, looking to their original host. He dropped to his knees. A fearful awe had stolen his wind and will. The man now had a nose, sturdy and angled like an immovable cliff, and two eyes more golden and glimmering than quaking aspens in the fall. "Stand!" When he spoke, gold dust flew from his unbound mouth, but rather than falling to the ground, the dust rose and formed a cloud around him. The giant grabbed Student around his face, his palms covering where his eyes once rested. Sizing his skull with his grip, he said, Yes, it will fit perfectly." He began speaking on a kingdom, on a king, whose fortress is of light and wisdom and wonder and truth. How it was being built for ages, but also the completion of those ages. How those who see were treasonous, but those who were blind became friends. Its economy was rich with poor vagrants, its foundation established in unsteady souls and rocking boats, its desire written not with ink, but with blood. Above the giant's head, the dust that had started as an ever-expanding constellation as he spoke, now rested condensed upon his brow. A crown of such simple and profound beauty. "We are done. But before you go..." The giant removed the crown from his head, and taking Student's head into his hands, he simultaneously crowned the teenager while pressing his palms into Student's face. He squeezed and squeezed until Student started to yell, then all went quiet again. Student opened his eyes, now molded back into his skull, and looked around. All was as it once was, sans the giant man. The pink path still marred the hillside. The same birds chirped. The crown remained, resting heavy upon his brow. Looking down, he saw the axe. It was no longer a hodgepodge of raw materials, but was now bedecked with golden ornament, ivory veins, and sapphire chinoiserie. It caught Student's reflection in a kaleidoscope of mirroring, and he could see the crown and promise bearing his image. Knowing he had to go somewhere, he began his regal return up the mountain to head home. At the peak, he discovered that the original path to the familiar had vanished and been overgrown by hedges of thorns. Though he was hesitant, the next steps were clear. Follow the path. Winding to and fro, he marched in silence, the axe swinging, the crown glinting, the mind lost in thought. Every now and again he could make out a black, glassy object in the sky, but with passing steps it would be clouded by foliage. Wispwoods, ember pines, shadow blooms, and flicker ferns all lined the path and shared the journey with him. They all spoke the language of age, but they didn't use words. He used words, but they seemed foolish among such company. Their dialogue faded when the path gave way to a hall of light, cutting the cloaked path ahead. The student approached and stood in the light, basking in blindness until his focus came. Before him stood a garden, manicured and cut by promenade leading to what appeared to be an obelisk of some type, broken and crumbling under the merciless hands of weather and time. Taking to the path, he made his way through the garden. All of the steps, made of various colors of quartz, had been split directly in two, broken with jagged teeth as its scars. The cracked ground beneath opened up into nothingness, no soil or stone they were resting upon. Student dropped a pebble into one of the cracks, but it never landed. The steps led up to a stone arch, benches built within its belly. Student sat and looked at the rubble, trying to imagine this stone reaching all the way into the heavens. With all the pieces around, he guessed it would have touched the foundations of heavens, a pious pillar spanning incalculable distances. Now all that resided was a holy mess, righteous rubble littering the foothill. A beam of light reflecting off the crystal stump began to inch closer to Student. Once it got close enough, he stuck his foot into the brilliant shard, and instantly a low hum formed in the distance. It was like the sound of 1,000 trees clapping in harmony, like the drum of a pulsing eternal light. It was like the fingers of looming rain strumming on a distant tin roof. It was the rubble. Student stood and followed the path into the debris, the melody crescendoing with each passing step. Every glassy black rock had its own unique voice. Different timbre, different pitch, same call. Looking around, lost in the symphony, the teenager unknowingly stepped into a mountainous refraction, and in an instant the stone's song elevated and was joined with things above and below. Clouds billowed a responding stanza, the colors swaying back and forth, each sharing a moment of jubilee. Red with blue, and then blue with green. How had the earth held such beauty behind such silence, suppressed this rich presence running quicksilver through creation's veins? How had thousands and thousands been singing, and he not heard? In this wall of sound, Student fell to the ground, immobile and mute until the light reflected from the shifting sun had passed over him, taking with it the weight of their adoration's tune. The calmness of the rock's shadowed sonnet restored Student enough to raise up and look around. The world looked the same as it did before, but what he had just heard now kept him from seeing anything the same. Whatever just happened, it must come with me. He reached over and found a humming crystal fragment and stuck it in his pocket where he was housing the stone sheep. Taking a deep breath, he gathered the axe and awe that had fallen to the floor, and stood, resuming his journey beyond the obelisk, onto the path, humming a song now seared between his ribs.